So we are going to go now to Peter and Jocelyn Rohan's garden in Richmond. So Peter and Jocelyn are neighbors of mine. They live about a mile away. And I want to say that we both live near Alvarado Park and Wildcat Creek. And Peter and Jocelyn wanted their garden to look like the natural environment around them. This was their garden when they bought the house in 2013, and they sheet mulched their lawn away. Everybody's doing it. And in its place, they installed a bunchgrass meadow. Here's their garden today, looking down from their deck. They have also installed a rain garden. This is their side of their house on the side of the driveway. And these beautiful Douglas irises in the front of their house. This is Dutchman's pipevine. This is the only host plant for the pipevine swallowtail butterfly. It has these interesting, pipe-shaped flowers. Without this plant, there would be no pipevine swallowtail butterfly. This is a little bridge that leads over their rainwater storage system. They have a laundry to landscape system, which is used to water their garden. And they keep their rainwater on site in a swale, and they walk over this little bridge to get to their house. And this is a very interesting living wall that they have in the backyard. So they could have put up a standard concrete wall or left a standard concrete wall in place, but instead they put in a living wall and planted it with California native plants. So this beautiful garden was designed and installed by Peter Rohan. He is the owner of Land Spaces Design and Construction. If you would be interested in having Peter design and install a garden for you, you will find his contact information in the Find a Designer section of the website. And I've just moved us to the wrong place. So let's go now to Peter. Hello, Peter and Jocelyn. How are you?
Hello. Hi.
Good.
Hey, so welcome. We just wanted to say hi, like to see our faces. Happy Mother's Day to moms, including you, Kathy. And we're hoping the technology we've invested in works well. We've practiced, it seems to be doing better. So let's hope it does do well today. We're gonna flip it around so you guys can see the context of our home. Across the street from our house is a channel that feeds Wet Creek. And it's full of oaks, bays, willows, and we really wanted to use the landscape that we found us and reflect that or complement it in our own garden. Peter and I are much interested in with nature, not against, and wanted to be able to invite wildlife into our garden, be able to host the variety of animals we find here. Deer come browse the plants regularly, but the garden remains very lush. We have numerous birds. We've had foxes play with our cats in the driveway, which is a little odd, but we have coyotes, turkey, vultures, and we used a book that helped us find what plants worked to create different plant communities. So with the plant community we tried to replicate was the closest one to us, the oak woodland. And the oak woodland, you can see here, is mostly chaparral community plants. We have manzanitas, sages, ceanothus, and the grasses that we mostly have dominating are Muhlenbergia or deer. And we like those because they seem to really be architecturally just outstanding plants. They add a lot of texture to the plant palette while
very low maintenance,
extremely low maintenance. And they go through periods of being beautifully green to being a gorgeous golden brown. And yeah, they just really stand out from the sages and manzanita around them. We also have this beautiful little orange flower here, which I can zoom in on at a different spot in the garden. This is Sphaerosia ambigua. I'll find the sign at the next spot. And it's a native of the California desert plant community, but it works really well in our garden because we don't water. We have watered for the tour, but we literally do not water the garden. The water the garden gets is what nature provides. That said, in our heaviest drought years, we have watered throughout the summer a couple of times a month. And that's really just to abate our fire hazards. So along the street, we created a swale, and Peter's going to tell you a little bit more about why he did that and what the purpose of the swale is.
Well, we were digging around in here to plant some plants and found a pipe under the driveway and thought, oh, well, let's use it. So we dug out the rest of the frontage. There's no sidewalks around here, by the way. The rest of the frontage lower than the street, so it would take the water instead of shedding it. And then that kind of put plants in there, the juncus and the California rose and the sages and coyote brush hanging over the old wall that we were trying to hide. So yeah, we're just trying to attempt to create a little mini creek environment, kind of low impact. Here's boulders kind of guarding the end of the, and you can drive up one section of it. But on the uphill and downhill side of the driveway, we just did a little, 2 foot wide and 1 foot deep little channel.
And I'm really happy that we're following the sheet mulching talk, because when we first acquired the property, this uphill section was covered in mulch and weeds. So as we started to weed this garden and weed the plants out, we noticed there was weed cloth in there. And what we noticed was that the weeds really firmly attached themselves to the weed cloth. The weed cloth really didn't stop the weeds at all. They just provided a healthy layer for them to root in. So we pulled out all the weed cloth and we sheet mulched. We used cardboard, and we had a tree company deliver about 40 cubic yards of bark mulch to the garden, to the house. And we used that here in this space and also in the meadow that we'll show you, which is another spot we sheet mulched. And in this area, there was also a large cedar, and just kind of another testament to how we like to use the materials we either have on site or use very environmentally friendly materials. We used all of the tree on site. So we used the bark, the chips for mulching, and we also used the logs, the rounds, as stair steppers in different parts of the garden. Here's the Sphaerosia. Of course, it's crowded by little plants, but it's SPH. So Sphaerosia, otherwise known as globe mallow. And this guy gets gorgeous little orange flowers that tend to like to open a little bit more in the sun. And because it's cloudy, they're a little bit closed up. Areophyllum is another fun one that we love. It's found in the lizard tail. It's a gorgeous grayish green foliage that really stands out, especially when you look at it in the context next to the sage. This is Salvia clevelandii, the Cleveland sage, another one of our favorites. This guy's great for the hummingbirds that come to visit. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about the laundry to landscape system and the swale that we created. We do have a pipe that comes out of the house and feeds the swale, and the headwaters have a grapevine and a holodiscus or ocean spray. And the swale starts here. You'll be able to see numerous types of, sorry, technical difficulties. Don't want to show you the sky. I want to show you the ground. There we go. We've got boulders in places to create little ponds, create pooling areas. So there could be some opportunities for infiltration. lots of different grasses that really like wet conditions. We loved the different flowers that we got, the sedges. This is Carex gynodynama, the hairy sedge. We have numerous other sedges around. Bee plant, juncus, of course, ribes. And as Kathy mentioned, we do have the bridge. So here's our little bridge that allows us to go from our driveway into the house. So you would take the bridge up the stairs. Here's another view of where Peter planted another type of sedge. This is the Carex nudata. Carex nudata is the black flowering sedge. This is a gorgeous Carex, very low maintenance.
Likes water.
It does like water, but what's interesting is that our laundry to landscape system is actually off right now. We've been having some technical difficulties with it. And despite it being off, these riparian species like the spice bush and this mugwort, they're doing really, really well. So there's something about just getting these guys established with the water and then maybe tapering it off as you don't need it so much. But here's our meadow. This was where the lawn was. And the meadow was sheet mulched in a different way than Kathy was mentioning. Normally you see bark on the surface, and most of the surface of this area was bark. However, where we wanted the meadow to be, we instead used a very rich compost. So instead of putting bark down, we put compost on top of the cardboard. And straight into the compost, we planted purple needlegrass and rescue plugs. And that worked really well. We watered it in, it took off, it was great. We had a gorgeous meadow. And then about 2 years later, some invasive little weed decided to come in and take over. So we had to weed that guy out. We didn't want it in the garden. We overseeded with red fescue seed and tried again. And fortunately, the Claytonia, or the miner's lettuce, decided it wanted to be our friend and it wanted to take over. So this little guy right here, gorgeous round leaf edible. It's delicious. We've added it to our salads. It's supposed to be a superfood. This little guy is now our dominant species in our meadow, and we no longer have control of our meadow. We've let nature take over. And so what you see is the succession of poppies that have followed the miner's lettuce. And it's just part of who we are as gardeners. We are okay with things changing seasonally and just successionally with what likes to seed itself in the garden. Like, for example, this cow parsnip. This is about 7.5, almost 8 feet tall. And it's decided it wanted to live here, and we were okay with that. We thought it was interesting and beautiful, and we're letting it go. So our meadow has gone from something very manicured and controlled to something we've just allowed to occur naturally. We have planted some more red fescue plugs to try to gain some control over it, but did you want to add anything, Peter?
No.
All right.
Not really.
So we're gonna head upstairs, and before we do though, I want to show you this lovely little plant. Absolutely adore. We've planted it near our steps so we can brush against it as much as possible. This guy is actually not a sage. Yeah. It's cut from my driveway. I have to rub against it. And the hummingbirds love it. The bees love it. It tends to look a little dry and brown in the summer, but that's okay. I feel like these little flower pods are very architecturally interesting, and we'll deadhead it once it's been spent in about January. We do have a white sage that is also part of our
8 feet tall
community. Yes, it's huge. So here's where we're going to have a little technological fun. We're going to lose you guys on this Wi-Fi signal. So we're going to switch to a different Wi-Fi channel. and our screen's going to go black for about, hopefully no more than 30-40 seconds. And when we get back to where we need to be on our new Wi-Fi channel, I'm hoping our video will be oriented in the right direction. If it's not, we might need your patience to just figure out how to get us back in the right direction. But thanks for your patience. We'll be right back with you.
Okay, so while Peter and Jocelyn are struggling with their Wi-Fi connection, I want to compliment them. Actually, they worked really hard. They got a gimbal, which, you know, helps with the audio visuals, and they bought Wi-Fi extenders to try to get a better image, and it worked really well in the front yard. Now they're going to something else for the backyard. I wanted to say that I love the wildlife use of this garden, that they've seen foxes in their driveway. And I know that they have a lot of bird use because I have been to visit them in the garden, and it really is lovely to sit there and listen to the birds.
All right, so we should be back. How did we do?
You did great.
Yay! So exciting. All right, well, here's our backyard. And we didn't show you a before picture of the backyard, but it was grass. And there were about 3 different levels, and the levels didn't have much usable space. So Peter decided to reuse the existing block, and we had an enormous concrete block wall here that is now the green wall. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. But we used all the blocks that we had on site to create a linear wall, which lent itself more to our mid-century architecture. And we capped it with a steel flat bar, which can be easily upcycled or recycled. And then we also have steel stairs that are cantilevered that take you from this lower level to the upper level. And we have so much more usable space. We have a red fescue meadow or lawn that our son plays on. We can play soccer, frisbee, lawn golf, and it doesn't require any mowing at all and very little weeding. I think we've weeded it half a dozen times in the few years we've had it. And it also doesn't require much water. If we want it to stay green, we do water it a couple of times a week in the summer, but typically we let it brown out and do its thing. The raised beds you see back here were Peter's creation using recycled decking material. He used a old deck material to create some raised beds for me to be able to grow veggies. And he also created another level. So we've got the boulders here, creating a little retaining area to hold back this level, and then also creating a little staircase up to our son's fort. And we decided to be more whimsical in the backyard. There are no deer back here, so we decided to try to be a little bit more English garden-y, trying to use as many natives as possible, so just having some fun with herbs and other pollinators. All right, so the living wall, the show stealer. You saw a beautiful picture of that wall after one of the rainiest winters we have ever had, and it was fabulous. The green grasses were the greenest they've ever been. And now we're looking at a lot of dieback, and we do maintain this. We will actually come and comb out some of the dead brown grasses, and we'll use them in our compost. We also sometimes just let it go and let it do its thing. It kind of depends on the feeling of the day. We've planted some perennials. This is one of our favorites for our neighborhood. It's the Erigeron glaucus. Seaside daisy really likes it in the shade where we live because we tend to get a little on the hot side, and it's just starting to bloom. Those little buds are so cute. They're like little eyeballs. And the other plant that's doing really well, you can see the green here, is the coyote mint or Monardella villosa. And I'm gonna take a step up a ladder to get up the wall here and show you that sign.
So most of the plants in here, we got our inspiration from kind of trail cuts on hikes, seeing kind of vertical slopes with things growing out of them. Thought, wow, we want that.
Right. One of our favorite places to hike is Fernandez Ranch, and they have glorious oak woodlands with those kind of trail cuts with lots of ferns and grasses and buttercups. And so we tried to plant some of those same things here to replicate that system. I'm just going to try to take a step back so you can see the scale of the wall. And so Peter's 6'6", to give you a little example of how tall that wall is. And if you do have more questions about how did you secure that thing, how is it not falling down or subsiding, Peter's more than happy to answer those questions.
And can I say that you can contact Peter by going to Find a Designer on the Garden Tours website, and you'll find him under Land Spaces.
So here we have our neighbor's fence, which was very stark when we had the concrete wall, and they have these two glorious oaks that they're really good at maintaining. So that was also another thing we really had to consider when we were designing this wall, was what's going to work under these oaks. We absolutely did not want to damage them at all. So we also thought about, that's another reason why we chose that oak woodland planting community. This is the buttercup. It's not flowering right now, but hopefully you guys have seen them. They're beautiful, buttery yellow, single flowers, almost like little poppies, but yellow and small and very cute. So did you want to say anything else about the wall?
Just a bit about how it was built.
Yeah.
It's basically wire cages made of wire mesh, and a lot of people would put rocks back in here, like a gabion sort of system, but we chose to backfill them with the native soil. Again, partly to reuse it instead of hauling it away, and then thought, oh, what better than planting in your gabions? So that's kind of where that came from. But it's just wire baskets stacked up and backfilled with soil with coconut coir fabric to stop the soil from falling out. And a lot of that has kind of faded away, but now it's pretty stable. And the plants help with that. Yeah.
And this has had to go through multiple different stages of planting. Every year, I feel like we add plants. So nothing has been 100% foolproof, except for probably the Monardella and the Carex. Yeah, again, that Carex. But this is definitely a high maintenance feature. It's going to require watering in the driest months if you want it to continue especially if it's a dry winter. But we've had to water this in the summer for sure. How many times a week or a month do you think we water this in the winter or the summer? I mean,
probably once or twice a week if it's really hot, because the drainage is, as you can imagine, phenomenal.
Right.
The top half tends to be bone dry when the bottom half is still moist, so it's a little tricky, but we hand irrigate it so you can kind of make up for that.
Right.
But doing like an irrigation system would have taken a lot more thought because of the vertical aspect. So it's a little tricky for water. The bottom would be dry in the beginning of a rain and the top would be wet in that case. So it's kind of all over the place, but I think it's fun.
Yeah, it's a fun feature. It makes us really happy to look at it when we're hanging out in the garden. We get this gorgeous visual respite. Instead of looking at a very stark, gray, hard concrete wall, we're looking at nature. So just to kind of give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek at what we missed in the driveway, because our Wi-Fi is horrible, our internet service is horrible. I'm going to see if we can give you a little peek of our swallowtail butterfly caterpillars that we have growing on our pipe, or we have living rather, on our pipe vine. As Kathy said, they're the only host to this caterpillar, and we have many different age ranges right now. We saw the eggs about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they've probably been laying a ton ever since. They're sinister, they're satanic, but they're gorgeous. And we love watching their metamorphosis in our garden.
It's like the perfect Halloween costume if someone could ever make that up.
And it took us about 7 years of having the vine growing in our garden to actually get the pipe vines to establish here. Partly, I think, sorry, my gimbal's being a little wily. Partly, I think what they really like is the juncus. So this guy's right now, he's clinging to a juncus. They really like those vertical spiky plants. And we also have a red bud nearby. And if you notice, the red bud's pods look a lot like their chrysalids. And I think my theory is they decided to settle once those things had been established so that they were able to camouflage and better defend themselves against predators. And of course, that's what we've seen flying in our yard. That was captured in the meadow last week. It was a thirsty little guy. And once it folded up its wings, you can see the beautiful orange spots, orange and yellow spots on the underside. So we feel really blessed to have these guys in the garden. And to get them here, we used a couple different resources. Our two favorite resources are designing California native gardens. This was our plant community approach. And it gave a lot of great community partnering ideas, but we weren't sure about the plants that they were mentioning. We didn't know the details, the sizes, the overall needs of the plants. So we decided to use this book to supplement. This is a great book for learning about the plants you're about to put in your community and if it works for you. So these were our two favorite resources we used for our native garden. And if there are any other questions or comments,
Jocelyn and
I'd be happy to
Peter,
talk about them.
I want to say thank you for persevering. I know you worked so hard. You got the gimbal, you got the Wi-Fi extender. It was clear. Your garden was beautiful. So that was a great presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was so nice to be able to do this.
Thank you.
Happy Mother's Day.
All right. Thank you. You too, Jocelyn.
All right.